I'm Lucy Barnes, 26 years old, and my relationship with my father has always been complicated. He's a man who measures worth in dollars and prestigious titles. But nothing prepared me for my birthday dinner last month, when instead of a gift, he handed me disownment papers. I was devastated, shattered, ready to give up, until an unexpected twist occurred when a CEO called my name and changed everything. Before I tell you how I went from being disowned to having my entire family shocked into silence, drop a heart in the comments if you've ever had to prove your worth to someone who should have believed in you from the start, and hit subscribe to join me through this wild journey. Growing up in Boston's affluent Beacon Hill neighborhood, I learned early that the Barnes name carried weight and expectations. My father, Walter Barnes, built his reputation as one of the city's most ruthless investment bankers. His perfectionism didn't stop at the office. At home, he demanded excellence in everything from table manners to test scores. Nothing less than perfection was acceptable in the Barnes household. My mother, Eleanor, a former debutante from another banking family, maintained our social calendar and our home with military precision, though she occasionally slipped me sympathetic glances across the dinner table. When my father's criticism became particularly harsh, she never openly contradicted him. "Your father wants what's best for you," she'd whisper, while brushing my hair before bed. "His methods may seem harsh, but that's how the world works, Lucy." Then there was my older brother James, the golden child. 3 years my senior, and every inch our father's son, from his perfectly combed hair to his economics degree from Harvard. James followed our father into finance without question, securing a position at Barnes Financial Group immediately after graduation. At family dinners, my father would beam with pride as James discussed market trends and investment strategies. I was the anomaly in our family of financial wizards. From childhood, I gravitated toward art, spending hours sketching designs and creating digital illustrations on my computer. My bedroom walls, once covered with my artwork, were gradually stripped bare, as my father deemed my creative pursuits impractical distractions. "The Barnes men have been in finance for 4 generations," my father would remind me regularly. "Your great-grandfather advised presidents. Your grandfather weathered the Great Depression without losing a single client. This legacy doesn't maintain itself with doodles and daydreams." Our family dinners were performances of achievement. Every Sunday evening, we'd gather in our formal dining room, where the antique mahogany table gleamed under the crystal chandelier. Each family member was expected to report their accomplishments for the week. James always had impressive numbers to share. New clients acquired, portfolios expanded. My mother would detail her charity board meetings and social connections cultivated. When my turn came, my father's attention would visibly wane unless I had something practical to report. My A in art class earned a dismissive nod. My perfect calculus score received a brief, "as expected." I tried desperately to win his approval. I joined the debate team, ran for student government, maintained a perfect GPA. For my 16th birthday, I requested finance books instead of art supplies. Still, James's mediocre achievements received lavish praise while my successes barely registered. "Lucy has potential," my father would tell his colleagues at company functions, as though I were an underperforming stock rather than his daughter. "Once she focuses on something substantial, she'll find her place." The pressure crushed me daily. Our family mansion, with its perfect facade and cold interior, mirrored our family dynamics perfectly. 5 bedrooms, 7 bathrooms, a legacy wing with portraits of Barnes patriarchs, and not a single space that felt like mine. By my senior year of high school, I made a painful decision: I would study business instead of pursuing design. I applied to my father's alma mater and was accepted with honors. The morning the acceptance letter arrived, my father actually smiled at me across the breakfast table, the first genuine smile I'd received in years. "Finally making sense," he said, tapping the college's embossed letterhead. "This is your first step toward joining the real world, Lucy." College should have been liberating, but instead it was 4 years of denying my own interests. I graduated summa cum laude with a business degree, minoring in economics. At my graduation dinner, while James received a new sports car for his recent promotion, I received a modest pearl necklace, and my father's comment that the real work begins now. The family dynamics were painfully predictable. James could do no wrong. When he lost a major client due to a calculation error, my father called it a learning opportunity. When I presented a market analysis that identified an emerging sector before our competitors, it was merely adequately researched. Through it all, my inner conflict grew. I desperately wanted my father's approval while resenting the need for it. I watched my mother's silent acquiescence to his demands and promised myself I wouldn't disappear the same way. The one person who seemed to understand was my Aunt Catherine, my father's younger sister, who had broken family tradition by becoming a professor of literature instead of entering finance. She had been effectively sidelined at family gatherings, treated with a mixture of condescension and grudging respect, due only to her academic achievements. "You have a spark they don't understand," Aunt Catherine told me during one of our secret coffee meetings. "Don't let them extinguish it, Lucy. I did what was expected until I couldn't anymore. Don't wait as long as I did to follow your heart." I nodded and smiled. But even as we spoke, I was preparing to interview for a position at my father's friend's investment firm. Another step away from my true interests, another move to secure the approval I still craved. My job at Hamilton and Reed Investment Solutions was precisely as soul-crushing as I'd feared. My cubicle in the downtown financial district offered a sliver of a view, just enough to watch the sun rise and set while I analyzed market trends and prepared client presentations. The office walls were the exact shade of beige that seems designed to extinguish creativity. "Another exciting day in paradise," I'd mutter each morning, straightening my bland professional attire before facing another day of pretending to be passionate about dividend yields and portfolio diversification. The one bright spot in my professional life was my independence. I had refused my father's offer to secure me a position at Barnes Financial. I want to make it on my own. I'd insisted, though we both knew any firm in Boston would hire Walter Barnes's daughter, regardless of her qualifications. Still, I paid my own rent for my modest one-bedroom apartment in Somerville, maintained my own car, and built my own professional wardrobe, all without touching my trust fund. Each evening after work and most weekends, I would transform my small dining table into a design studio. I'd change from my restrictive business attire into comfortable clothes, make a cup of tea, and lose myself in design work for hours. I created logos, website mock-ups, and most importantly, a user interface system that I'd been conceptualizing since college, one focused on accessibility for users with various disabilities. "This is Lucy Barnes," I'd whisper to my reflection sometimes. "The real one." 3 months into my finance job, I met Morgan Chen, a fellow analyst who had joined from a tech company. Unlike our other colleagues, Morgan didn't seem beaten down by the corporate environment. She wore colorful scarves with her business suits and spoke enthusiastically about design thinking and user experience. "You're different," she said one day over lunch in the company cafeteria. "You don't have the soul-dead eyes of most finance people." I laughed nervously. "I don't know what you mean." "Sure you do. You're watching the clock until you can go home and do whatever actually lights you up." She leaned forward. "So, what is it? What's your secret passion?" Something about her directness broke through my careful facade. I pulled out my phone and showed her some of my design work. Morgan's eyes widened. "Lucy, this is incredible. Why are you here analyzing market trends when you could be designing?" That simple question cracked open something inside me. Over the next few weeks, Morgan became not just a colleague, but a friend. She began bringing me job postings from tech companies, sending me articles about UX design, encouraging me to build a professional portfolio. "Nexus Innovations is hiring," she announced one day, dropping a printed job listing on my desk. "Senior UX designer position. And before you say it's out of your league, it's not. Your accessibility interface is exactly the kind of thing they're looking for." Nexus Innovations was a rapidly growing tech company creating cutting-edge software solutions. Their products were known for being both beautiful and functional. Just reading about them made my pulse quicken. My father would consider a tech startup too risky. I said automatically, then hated myself for it. Morgan raised an eyebrow. "Are you applying for this job or is your father—" Her question hit home. That evening, I stayed up until 3 a.m., refining my portfolio and crafting a detailed cover letter. My hands hesitated over the submit button. Applying meant potentially stepping away from the path my father had set for me, the safe, respectable career in finance that might finally earn his approval. I clicked submit at 3:17 a.m., then couldn't sleep for the rest of the night. The following weeks were a strange double life. At Hamilton and Reed, I continued analyzing investments and preparing client presentations. In private, I obsessively checked my email for a response from Nexus Innovations. When the interview request finally came, I nearly dropped my phone. They wanted to see me the following Tuesday at 10 a.m. Right in the middle of my workday. I called in sick for the first time since starting at Hamilton and Reed, feeling both guilty and exhilarated. The Nexus headquarters was nothing like the staid financial offices I was accustomed to. Glass and open spaces, collaborative workstations, and walls covered with concept sketches and user flow diagrams. People wore everything from suits to hoodies, and the energy was palpable. "Welcome to Nexus," said the HR director, a woman with a bright smile and a firm handshake. "We were impressed by your portfolio, especially your accessibility interface concepts." The interview lasted 2 hours. Rather than the standard questions about 5-year plans and greatest weaknesses, the team asked me to walk through my design process, explain my choices, and even sketch potential solutions to problems they were currently facing. "There's one more thing," the HR director said as we were wrapping up. "Alexander Reed, our CEO, saw your portfolio and specifically requested to meet you if the initial interview went well." My heart nearly stopped. The CEO wants to meet me. He's particularly interested in your accessibility work. He believes technology should be for everyone, not just the able-bodied or technically inclined. I left the building in a daze, changing in a coffee shop bathroom back into my finance-appropriate attire before returning to Hamilton and Reed for the afternoon. No one questioned my absence. I was Walter Barnes's daughter after all. A week later, I received another email from Nexus. Alexander Reed wanted to meet me personally to discuss my designs. The meeting was scheduled for the following Wednesday afternoon. This second interview was even more intensive. I presented my accessibility interface to a room of executives, explaining how standard designs often failed users with various disabilities, and demonstrating how my system could adapt to different needs without sacrificing aesthetics or functionality. "You've clearly put a lot of thought into this," said one executive. "How long have you been working on accessibility design?" "Since college," I admitted. I had a roommate with partial vision loss who struggled with most websites and apps. It seemed wrong that technology was leaving people behind. Alexander Reed himself was nothing like I expected. In his early 40s, he had the casual confidence of someone who valued substance over appearance. He asked the most challenging questions, pushing me to defend my design choices and explain my methodology. As I left the Nexus building after that second interview, I felt more alive than I had in years. Regardless of the outcome, I had been seen for my work. My real work, not just as Walter Barnes's daughter, going through the motions of a finance career. The next 2 weeks were agony. I checked my email, constantly jumped whenever my phone rang, and found it increasingly difficult to focus on my investment analyses. Morgan noticed my distraction, but kept my secret, occasionally giving me encouraging thumbs up across the office. Then came the email requesting a final presentation to Nexus's entire executive team. "This is unusual," the HR director wrote, "but Mr. Reed believes your accessibility framework deserves full consideration by our leadership." I spent every free moment preparing for this presentation, refining my designs, anticipating questions, practicing my delivery. This wasn't just about a job anymore. It was about being recognized for who I truly was, not who my father wanted me to be. Little did I know that while I was preparing for the biggest opportunity of my career, my father was preparing to cut me out of his life entirely. My birthday has never been a joyful occasion in the Barnes family. Instead of celebration, it's always been an annual assessment of my progress toward family expectations. This year, my 26th, I foolishly hoped things might be different. The Hawthorne restaurant is Boston's old money establishment. Dark wood paneling, hushed conversations, waitstaff who appear and disappear like well-dressed ghosts. My father had reserved our usual private dining room in the back, the one with portraits of Boston's founding families lining the walls. The Barnes ancestors weren't among them, a slight that my father never acknowledged, but everyone knew bothered him immensely. I spent extra time getting ready that evening, selecting a navy blue dress that projected professionalism, while still feeling somewhat like me. I added Aunt Catherine's silver bracelet for courage and a touch of red lipstick for confidence. "Happy birthday, darling," my mother said when I arrived, air kissing both my cheeks. She looked elegant as always in her pearl gray suit, though I noticed new lines of worry around her eyes. James was already there, deep in conversation with our father about his recent promotion to senior investment strategist. At 29, my brother looked every inch the barn's heir. Tailored suit, confident posture, our father's calculating eyes. Lucy, my father acknowledged without standing. Punctual, at least. Dinner proceeded with excruciating predictability. James dominated the conversation with tales of his latest client acquisition, a retired tech CEO with a portfolio worth millions. My father nodded approvingly occasionally, adding advice or connections James might leverage. And Barnes Financial is projecting a 15% increase this quarter, James concluded smugly. The new algorithmic trading system I implemented is already showing results. My mother made several valiant attempts to include me. Lucy's manager speaks very highly of her analytical skills, she offered during a rare pause in the James and Walter show. My father barely glanced my way. Hamilton and Reed sets a low bar. A Barnes should exceed expectations, not merely meet them. I sipped my wine and thought about the Nexus presentation scheduled for the following week. For a fleeting moment, I imagined announcing it at this table. The shocked expressions, my father's disapproval, perhaps a flicker of respect from James. Lucy seems distracted tonight, my father observed sharply. Something more important on your mind than family dinner? No, sir. I responded automatically, the old patterns reasserting themselves. Just grateful to be here. The waiters brought our main courses, filet mignon for my father and James salmon for my mother. And the vegetarian option for me, another small rebellion that my father tolerated with barely concealed disdain. As we ate, Walter began making pointed comments about career stability and family loyalty. In uncertain times, traditional industries provide security, he pronounced. These fly-by-night tech companies appear and disappear like mayflies. No foundation, no legacy. My stomach tightened. Had he somehow discovered my Nexus interviews? I glanced at James, but he was focused on cutting his steak into precisely even pieces. When the dessert plates were cleared, the traditional birthday gift exchange began. In the Barnes family, gifts were statements, not celebrations. James handed me a small box wrapped in silver paper. Happy birthday, sis. Inside was an expensive watch from the same Swiss manufacturer that all Barnes family members wore. Practical, traditional, completely impersonal. Thank you, James. It's beautiful. The watch felt heavy on my wrist like another shackle. My mother's gift was a gift certificate to Brooks Brothers, another subtle push toward proper Barnes attire. I thought you might want to refresh your work wardrobe, she explained with an apologetic smile. Then my father reached into his suit jacket and withdrew an envelope. This was usually the moment for the birthday check, always a substantial amount with the clear expectation it would be invested according to Barnes family principles, not spent on frivolities. Lucy, he said, his voice unusually formal, you're 26 now, old enough to understand consequences. He slid the envelope across the table. Unlike the usual cream-colored bank envelope, this one was legal-sized and made of heavy stock. The dining room seemed to grow quieter as I picked it up. I slid my finger under the flap, noticing my mother's sudden tension, and James's slight smirk. The document inside was headed, Notice of Family Disownment and Financial Severance. My hands began to shake as I read the cold legal language. Walter Barnes hereby severed all financial ties with Lucille Barnes. Removal from trust fund access. Withdrawal of health insurance coverage. 60 days to vacate any property subsidized by Barnes family funds. I looked up to find my father watching me with clinical detachment. What is this? My voice came out as a whisper. I know about your interviews at Nexus Innovations, he said flatly. James's college roommate works in their HR department. You've been lying to us for weeks. The private dining room suddenly felt airless. At nearby tables, conversations quieted as diners sensed the unfolding drama. I haven't accepted any position, I managed. I was exploring options. Betrayal is betrayal, my father continued. The Barnes family has traditions, standards. You've been given every advantage, the finest education connections most people would kill for. And you throw it away for some computer company. Nexus Innovations is one of the fastest growing tech firms in the country, I said, finding my voice. Their work is innovative and meaningful. Walter's expression hardened. Your position at Hamilton and Reed was arranged through my personal relationship with Charles Hamilton. Your abandonment reflects directly on me. I didn't ask you to arrange that job, I countered, my heart pounding. I took it to please you. Ungrateful, Walter snapped. Everything I've done has been for your benefit. James leaned back in his chair, enjoying the spectacle. My mother stared at her folded hands, tears threatening. You have a choice, my father continued. Continue your position at Hamilton and Reed, forget this tech nonsense, and we'll tear up these papers. Or pursue this childish rebellion and lose your position in this family permanently. The ultimatum hung in the air. Around us, other diners were openly watching, now the hushed whispers making it clear our family drama had become the evening's entertainment. I looked down at the disownment papers, then at my father's cold eyes, my mother's tearful submission, my brother's smug satisfaction. 26 years of trying to earn approval from a man who saw me as an investment rather than a daughter. Did you have me followed? I asked, suddenly the realization dawning. My father didn't deny it. I protect my interests. Thomas Miller is very thorough. Thomas Miller, the private investigator my father sometimes used for business intelligence. He'd had me followed like a cheating business partner. In that moment, something broke inside me. Not my spirit, but the chains I'd allowed to bind me to others' expectations. I stood slowly gathering my purse and the disownment papers. Lucy, my mother pleaded softly, think about what you're doing. I looked at each of them. My controlling father, my passive mother, my arrogant brother. The perfect Barnes family portrait, with no place for someone like me. I have thought about it, I said quietly, for 26 years. I walked out of the Hawthorne restaurant with my head high, ignoring the curious stares of Boston's elite. Outside, the April evening had turned cold and rainy, fitting weather for the death of illusions. I declined the valet's offer to call me a car and walked the 20 blocks to my apartment in the rain, the disownment papers growing soggy in my hand, my tears mixing with raindrops on my face. By the time I reached home, I was soaked through my carefully selected birthday outfit, ruined my makeup streaked down my cheeks. I collapsed on my couch and finally allowed myself to break down completely, sobbing until exhaustion overtook me. I had just lost my family, my financial security, and any remaining illusions about my place in the world. And all I felt underneath the pain was a strange, terrifying sense of freedom. I woke the next morning with swollen eyes and a sense of unreality, as though the previous night had been a particularly vivid nightmare. The soggy disownment papers on my coffee table confirmed it wasn't. My phone showed 17 missed calls, 15 from my mother, 2 from Aunt Catherine. There were also multiple text messages ranging from my mother's desperate pleas to reconcile with my father to James's smug, "You always did have to learn things the hard way." I was still sitting there staring blankly at my phone when Morgan knocked on my door an hour later. "I brought reinforcements," she announced, holding up a carrier with 2 large coffees and a bag of pastries. "You weren't answering texts, and you never miss work without notice. What's going on?" One look at my face told her something was seriously wrong. I handed her the now dry but crumpled disownment papers without a word. "Holy shit," Morgan whispered as she read. "Your father disowned you over a job interview." She looked up, outrage clear in her expression. "Is this even legal?" "Probably." I accepted the coffee she offered. "He's not disinheriting me from a will, yet. Just cutting off access to family resources that are technically in his control." "What resources exactly?" I ticked them off. "Trust fund access, which I rarely used anyway. Health insurance through the family plan. The lease on this apartment, which apparently he's been subsidizing without telling me. That explains why it's so affordable. Membership at the country club, which I never use. The Barnes family credit card for emergencies." Morgan sat beside me on the couch. "That's financial abuse, Lucy." "That's the Barnes family business model," I corrected bitterly. "Everything comes with strings attached. I just never thought he'd actually cut them." "So what are you going to do?" The question hung in the air as I considered my options. My salary at Hamilton and Reed was decent, but not enough to afford a comparable apartment in Boston. My health insurance would terminate at the end of the month. My savings would last a few months at best. I don't know, I admitted. Going back to Hamilton and Reed isn't an option. Charles Hamilton is my father's golf buddy. He's probably already been instructed to fire me. As if summoned by our conversation, my phone buzzed with a new email notification. I expected it to be from Hamilton and Reed's HR department, formalizing my termination. Instead, it was from Nexus Innovations. Dear Ms. Barnes, I read aloud, my voice shaking. We were impressed by your previous presentations and would like to invite you for a final interview with our complete executive team next Wednesday at 10 a.m. Please prepare a comprehensive presentation of your accessibility framework for our product line. Morgan squealed and grabbed my hands. Lucy, this is it. This is your chance to break free. I stared at the email, conflicting emotions warring inside me. Excitement, opportunity, vindication, but also fear, uncertainty, and the lifetime of conditioning that made disappointing my father feel like a moral failure. What if I'm making a huge mistake? I whispered. What if I throw away my family for a job I don't even get? What if you get it and discover who you really are without your father's shadow over you? Morgan countered. Lucy, I've known you less than a year, and even I can see you're withering in finance. Your designs are brilliant. You light up when you talk about accessibility and user experience. That's the real you. My phone rang again. My mother. With a deep breath, I answered. Lucy. Her voice was strained from crying. Where are you? Are you all right? I'm at home, Mom. I'm okay. Your father was just upset last night. If you apologize and promise to stay at Hamilton and Reed, I'm sure he'll reconsider. The familiar pattern. My father's rage, my mother's peacekeeping, my eventual capitulation. Not this time. I'm not apologizing for interviewing for a job I'm qualified for and passionate about, Mom. A pause. He's very hurt, Lucy. He's invested so much in your future. In the future he wanted for me, I corrected gently. Not the one I want for myself. Another pause, longer this time. I've never stood up to your father, she said finally, her voice so quiet I could barely hear it. Not once in 30 years of marriage. Sometimes I wonder who I might have been if I had. The admission stunned me. My perfectly proper mother acknowledging her own lost identity. I admire your courage, she continued softly. But please be careful. Walter isn't accustomed to being defied. After we hung up, I sat in silence, absorbing the enormity of what was happening. My mother's rare moment of honesty felt like permission to continue on this new path, whatever the consequences. My phone rang again. Aunt Catherine this time. Your mother called me in tears, she said without preamble. Walter's finally done it. Hasn't he cut you off for not being his puppet? How did you know? Because he threatened the same with me when I chose academia over finance. The difference is I had independent means from our grandmother. He couldn't touch those. A thought occurred to me. Did she leave me anything? Not directly. Walter made sure of that. But I've been setting aside funds for you for years just in case this day came. Not a fortune, but enough to give you breathing room. Tears sprang to my eyes. Aunt Catherine, I can't accept— Nonsense, she interrupted briskly. Consider it an investment in the person you're meant to be, not the one Walter tried to create. Now tell me about this job interview. With Morgan providing moral support and Aunt Catherine offering practical advice, I spent the next hour calculating exactly what my situation was. My savings would cover about 3 months of expenses if I was careful. Aunt Catherine's generous offer would extend that runway significantly. The health insurance issue was more problematic. Individual plans were expensive, but going without coverage wasn't an option. Housing would be the biggest challenge. I'd need to find a new apartment quickly once my 60 days were up. One step at a time, Aunt Catherine advised. First, knock them dead at Nexus. Everything else follows from there. I had just ended the call with a promise to keep her updated when my brother James texted, "Father's calming down. If you come by the house tonight and apologize, this can all be fixed. Don't be stubborn." Are you going? Morgan asked, reading over my shoulder. I considered it for a moment. The easy path back to family approval, financial security, the comfortable Barnes bubble. Then I pictured the Nexus offices, the excitement I felt discussing my designs, the possibility of work that mattered to me. No, I replied both to Morgan and in a text back to James. I'm done apologizing for who I am. I spent the remainder of the weekend reorganizing my life. I updated my resume just in case Nexus didn't work out. I called my landlord to confirm my lease terms. I researched health insurance options. And most importantly, I refined my presentation for Nexus until every slide was perfect. Monday morning, I received a terse email from Charles Hamilton confirming my employment at Hamilton, and Reed had been terminated effective immediately. My personal belongings would be couriered to my apartment. No explanation was required. We both knew why. On Tuesday afternoon, James appeared at my door unexpectedly. "Father sent me to talk sense into you," he announced, inviting himself in and looking around my apartment with barely concealed disdain. "This rebellious phase has gone far enough, Lucy." "It's not a phase, James. It's my life." My brother sighed dramatically and sat on my couch. "Look, I get it. You want to prove something, but there's a difference between making a point and destroying your future." "My future in finance was your dream, not mine," I replied, remaining standing. "I have a chance at something I actually want." James's expression shifted, something vulnerable briefly visible beneath his Barnes family mask. "You think I always wanted this finance and family legacy and constant pressure to perform, didn't you?" He laughed humorlessly. "I was 7 when Father started taking me to the office on Saturdays. 7 when he explained that generations of Barnesmen had built something I couldn't let fail. My entire life was mapped out before I could read." "Then why stay?" I asked, genuinely curious. James straightened his tie, his mask slipping back into place. "Because disappointing Walter Barnes isn't an option. The sooner you accept that, the happier you'll be." After he left, I sat contemplating his words. James, for all his privileges, and our father's approval, was perhaps more trapped than I had ever been. The next day was my final interview at Nexus. I selected my outfit carefully, professional but with creative touches that expressed my personality. As I prepared, I realized this presentation wasn't just about a job. It was about claiming my identity. The morning of the interview, I received a text from Morgan. "You were born for this moment. Show them the real Lucy Barnes." For the first time in 26 years, that's exactly what I intended to do. The Nexus Innovations headquarters gleamed in the morning sunlight. Its glass and steel structure a stark contrast to the staid brick buildings of Boston's financial district. As I approached the revolving doors, my portfolio case clutched tightly in one hand. I felt both terrified and exhilarated. The security guard recognized me from my previous visits and smiled. "Back again, Ms. Barnes. Must be something special brewing." "I hope so," I replied, accepting the visitor badge he handed me. The executive floor reception area was minimalist and elegant, all clean lines and muted colors with splashes of Nexus's signature blue. The receptionist, a poised woman with a streak of purple in her dark hair, greeted me warmly. "The team is ready for you in the main boardroom, Ms. Barnes. Can I get you anything before you go in? Water, coffee?" My mouth was dry with nerves. "Water would be wonderful, thank you." As I waited, I studied my reflection in the glass wall. I looked different somehow, still recognizably Lucy Barnes, but with a determination in my eyes that hadn't been there before. The woman looking back at me wasn't Walter Barnes's disappointing daughter. She was a professional with something valuable to offer. The boardroom door opened, and the HR director I'd met previously emerged. "Lucy, wonderful to see you again. We're all set up for you." The boardroom was intimidating. A long table of polished walnut surrounded by 12 executive chairs, most already occupied by senior Nexus leaders. At the far end, a large screen was ready for my presentation. I recognized several faces from my previous interviews, but there were new ones as well. Serious expressions, evaluating gazes. These were people who made million-dollar decisions daily. "Thank you for coming back, Ms. Barnes," said the chief operating officer, a woman in her 50s with silver-streaked hair and sharp eyes. "We're looking forward to seeing your complete accessibility framework." I was setting up my laptop when the door opened again and a tall man with salt and pepper hair entered. The energy in the room immediately shifted as everyone straightened slightly. I'm late, he said, taking the seat at the head of the table. Traffic was a nightmare. The COO nodded. Ms. Barnes, this is Alexander Reed, our founder and CEO. Alexander Reed looked nothing like the tech billionaires who graced magazine covers. No hoodies or sneakers. He wore a well-tailored suit, though without a tie. His eyes were intensely blue and keenly intelligent as he extended his hand to me. Lucy Barnes, he said, his grip firm. I've been looking forward to meeting you. Your accessibility interface concept caught my attention immediately. My heart raced. The CEO had personally noticed my work. Thank you for the opportunity, Mr. Reed, I managed, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. Please, it's Alex to everyone here. We don't stand on ceremony at Nexus. With a deep breath, I began my presentation. I explained how standard user interfaces often created barriers for people with visual impairments, motor limitations, cognitive differences, and other accessibility needs. I demonstrated my adaptive interface system that could seamlessly adjust to different user requirements without compromising functionality or aesthetic appeal. The core principle is inclusive design from the ground up. I explained, clicking through examples. Rather than retrofitting accessibility features after development, which often results in clunky workarounds, my framework integrates these considerations from the beginning. As I spoke, my nervousness fell away. This wasn't a performance for approval. It was sharing something I genuinely cared about with people who seemed equally invested. The executives asked thoughtful questions, challenging but not adversarial, pushing me to elaborate on technical details and implementation strategies. Alexander Reed's questions were particularly insightful, focusing on user experience aspects I hadn't considered. How would this framework adapt to emerging technologies like voice interfaces and augmented reality? He asked. I hadn't prepared specifically for that question, but the answer came naturally as I diagrammed potential adaptations on the whiteboard. The underlying principle remains the same: designing for the broadest possible spectrum of abilities from inception, rather than as an afterthought. When I finished my formal presentation, there was a moment of silence that made my stomach clench with uncertainty. Alexander stood. That was excellent, Lucy. Now I have a question that's not about your design work. Your resume indicates you're currently at Hamilton and Reed Investment Solutions. May I ask why you're looking to make such a significant career change? I hesitated. Should I give the safe answer about seeking new challenges, or tell the truth? In that moment, I decided honesty was the only option that honored the path I'd chosen. Until yesterday, I was at Hamilton and Reed, I clarified. My employment was terminated after my father discovered I was interviewing with Nexus. Surprise flickered across several faces. Your father being? Alexander prompted. Walter Barnes of Barnes Financial Group. Recognition dawned in his eyes. Walter Barnes is your father, interesting. And he opposed your interest in Nexus specifically. He opposes anything outside finance, Mr. Reed. The Barnes family has certain expectations. When I failed to meet them by exploring opportunities here, my father presented me with disownment papers on my birthday. The room grew very quiet. I hadn't intended to share such personal details, but somehow the truth came pouring out. He had me followed by a private investigator who reported my interviews here. He's terminated my health insurance, my housing subsidy, and my access to family funds. But I'm still here because I believe in the work I've shown you today. Alexander studied me thoughtfully, then glanced at his executives. Could we have the room, please? I'd like to speak with Ms. Barnes privately. My heart sank. I'd shared too much, made things awkward. As the others filed out, I prepared myself for a gentle rejection. Once we were alone, Alexander gestured to a chair beside him. Please sit. I perched nervously on the edge of the seat. Walter Barnes called me last week, he said matter-of-factly. My stomach dropped. He did. Alexander nodded. He suggested that hiring his daughter would be inadvisable. He implied you were unstable, impulsive, and unsuited for the corporate world. He hinted that Barnes Financial might reconsider potential investments in Nexus if we proceeded. Humiliation burned through me. Of course my father would try to sabotage me this way. I see, I managed. Mr. Reed, I assure you. He held up a hand, stopping me. Here's what I found fascinating, Lucy. Your father's call had the opposite effect of what he intended. When someone tries that hard to prevent a hiring, it suggests the candidate has something special, something worth controlling or fearing. I stared at him, processing his words. My father was like yours, Alexander continued. Old Boston money, rigid expectations, no tolerance for deviation from the prescribed path. He wanted me in law or finance. When I started Nexus 15 years ago, he cut me off completely. What happened? I asked softly. A slight smile crossed his face. 5 years later, I bought the building his law firm was in and renamed it Nexus Tower. Petty, perhaps. Satisfying, absolutely. Despite everything, I laughed. Alexander's smile widened. Lucy, your work isn't just good, it's revolutionary. Your accessibility framework addresses problems most designers don't even recognize exist. Your presentation today confirmed what I suspected from your portfolio. You have exceptional talent and vision. He leaned forward. I'm not interested in hiring you as a designer. I want to create a new department focused entirely on accessibility integration across all Nexus products, and I want you to lead it. I couldn't have heard him correctly. Lead it? But I don't have management experience. You have vision, passion, and first-hand experience fighting against limitations others impose. That's more valuable than 10 years of management courses. He named a salary that made me gasp, nearly double what I'd made at Hamilton and Reed. Why? I asked, still unable to believe what I was hearing. Why take a chance on me? Alexander's expression grew serious. Because 15 years ago, someone took a chance on me when my father was making similar calls. And because your designs aren't just aesthetically superior, they open doors for people who've been excluded. That aligns perfectly with Nexus's mission. He stood and extended his hand. So, Lucy Barnes, would you like to become Nexus's first director of accessibility innovation? I stood on shaky legs and took his hand. Yes, absolutely yes. Excellent. HR will have the paperwork ready tomorrow. Welcome to Nexus, Lucy. His grin was infectious. And if your father calls again, I'll be delighted to inform him personally of your new title. I left Nexus that afternoon with an employment contract instead of disownment papers, walking on air, despite the uncertainty still facing me. For the first time in my life, I'd been valued for my true abilities, not my family name or my ability to conform. The Barnes family had given me up, but I'd found something more valuable, myself. My first day at Nexus felt like stepping into another world, one where creativity was valued, hierarchy was fluid, and innovation was the currency that mattered most. The orientation introduced me to company traditions I couldn't imagine at Barnes Financial quarterly hackathons, flexible work schedules, collaborative spaces, designed for spontaneous idea sharing. Your team is being assembled now, explained Gabriela Martinez, the senior UX director who would be my mentor. 6 designers and engineers all passionate about accessibility. You'll interview candidates starting next week. My own team, my own budget, my own vision valued and supported. The contrast with my previous life was dizzying. I don't know the first thing about managing people, I confessed to Gabriella during our coffee break. She laughed. None of us did at first. Technical skills got us hired. Learning to lead is part of growing here. I'll help you navigate the transition. Gabriella became not just a mentor, but a friend. In her 50s, with decades of experience in technology, she'd broken barriers in a male-dominated field and seemed to instantly understand the challenges I faced. Always remember, she advised, they hired you for your vision, not your ability to replicate what already exists. Be bold. My apartment situation became urgent as the 60-day deadline for my father approached. Boston's rental market was brutal, especially on short notice. I began searching for more affordable options outside the city. I can't believe I didn't know my father was subsidizing my rent, I told Morgan over dinner at her place one evening. I thought I was being so independent. That's Financial Control 101, Morgan replied. Keep you dependent without letting you know you're dependent. When I'd been at Nexus for 3 weeks, Morgan and her girlfriend threw me a belated career independence party. It wasn't fancy, just pizza and wine in Morgan's small apartment. But surrounded by supportive friends, I felt richer than I ever had at the Barnes family mansion. To Lucy, Morgan toasted, raising her glass. Who had the courage to choose herself? The following Monday, Alexander called me into his office. How's the team building going? He asked after I'd settled into the chair across from his desk. We've filled 4 positions so far, I reported, still interviewing for the senior engineer role. Good, good. He seemed distracted. Listen, Lucy, there's something you should know. Your father has been making calls to several of our investors. My stomach tightened. What kind of calls? The kind suggesting Nexus has made a questionable hiring decision. The kind hinting that Barnes Financial might advise clients against investing in our next funding round. He leaned back. Standard intimidation tactics. I'm so sorry, I began, but Alexander waved away my apology. I'm telling you as a courtesy, not because I'm concerned. Walter Barnes overestimates his influence in the tech sector. Our investors are unimpressed by old money strong-arming. While my professional life flourished, my personal life remained complicated. My mother called daily, her messages alternating between pleas for reconciliation and updates on my father's continued anger. James texted occasionally, his tone growing less condescending as weeks passed without my capitulation. Father's planning the annual Barnes Financial Gala, he texted one morning. Mother hopes you'll attend. Olive branch and all that. The Barnes Financial Group annual gala was the highlight of Boston's financial social calendar. Held at the historic Fairmont Copley Plaza, it showcased the firm's success and solidified business relationships. I'd attended dutifully every year since college, smiling politely as my father introduced me as his daughter, who was finding her way in finance. Not this year, I replied to James. I don't think I'd be welcome. Mother would be devastated if you weren't there, he countered. And father's anger is cooling. He asks about you, you know. I doubted that very much, but the thought of disappointing my mother added to my growing guilt. Despite everything, I still felt responsible for her happiness. Later that week, Aunt Catherine visited my new apartment in Cambridge, smaller than my previous place, but entirely mine paid for with my Nexus salary. The gala invitation arrived yesterday, she mentioned as we shared tea in my compact kitchen. I assume you received one as well. James mentioned it, but no formal invitation. I'm not going. Aunt Catherine studied me over her teacup. You know, avoidance can feel like freedom, but sometimes it's just another form of allowing others to dictate your choices. What does that mean? It means Walter expects you to either apologize and return to the fold or disappear entirely. Showing up on your own terms, successful, independent, unapologetic, is the one thing he's not prepared for. Her words stayed with me, challenging my assumption that staying away was the stronger choice. The next morning, Alexander stopped by my workspace where I was reviewing prototype screens with my team. Quick question, he said after the team dispersed. Is your family connected to the Barnes Financial Group Gala next month? Surprised, I nodded. That's my father's company. Why? Interesting. We just received an invitation. Nexus is being courted as a potential partner for their new technology investment division. My mind raced. My father's firm voluntarily entering the tech sector he'd dismissed as unstable, and inviting Nexus specifically. Will you attend? I asked carefully. Probably. These financial partnerships can be valuable, and we're looking to expand our enterprise services. He tilted his head, though I'm sensing some complexity here. My father disowned me for joining Nexus. Now he's inviting Nexus to his firm's gala. Alexander's eyes widened slightly. Well, that is interesting. A thoughtful pause. Would it be problematic if you attended as part of the Nexus delegation, professionally speaking? The possibility hadn't occurred to me. Attend the Barnes Gala not as Walter's daughter seeking approval, but as a Nexus executive representing my company's interests. The idea was both terrifying and oddly appealing. I'd need to think about it, I said honestly. Of course. It's entirely your decision. That evening, I called Aunt Catherine for advice. Go, she said immediately. Not for Walter, not even for your mother. Go for yourself, Lucy. Show them who you've become when you stop trying to be who they wanted. What if he makes a scene? Walter Barnes making a scene at his own carefully orchestrated gala impossible. His image matters far too much, she chuckled. Besides, you'll be there as a representative of a company he's courting. The power dynamic has shifted, dear. It's time you both recognize that. The night before the gala, I stood before my mirror examining my reflection. The woman looking back at me had changed in the months since my birthday dinner. There was confidence in her posture, clarity in her eyes. My Nexus business cards read, Lucy Barnes, Director of Accessibility Innovation, a title I'd earned through my own merit, not family connections. Whatever happened tomorrow night, I was no longer the Lucy who had accepted disownment papers with tears and shame. I was someone new. Or perhaps I was finally the person I'd always been beneath the weight of Barnes' family expectations. I was ready to face my father on my own terms. The Fairmont Copley Plaza ballroom glittered with crystal chandeliers and Boston's financial elite in formal attire. I arrived with the Nexus delegation, Alexander, our CFO, Rachel Wong, and two other executives. While they wore standard formal business attire, I'd chosen a deep blue gown that was both professional and striking. No Barnes-approved muted colors tonight. Impressive turnout, Alexander commented as we entered. Your father clearly knows how to draw a crowd. The Barnes Financial Gala is a command performance for anyone who matters in Boston finance, I explained. Absence is noted and remembered. Much like the court of Louis XIV, Alexander quipped. Shall we mingle? I'm curious to meet the king. Despite my newfound confidence, my heart raced as we moved through the crowd. I recognized familiar faces from my father's world, partners at prestigious firms, old money families, political figures who depended on financial sector donations. Many did double takes upon seeing me with the Nexus group, quickly masking their surprise with society smiles. Lucy Barnes, what a lovely surprise, cooed Margot Cavendish, a longtime friend of my mother's. We've missed you at the club. Your mother mentioned you've been exploring new opportunities. The euphemism for family disgrace wasn't lost on me. Yes, I'm directing the Accessibility Innovation Department at Nexus now. It's challenging and rewarding work. Her smile tightened. How modern. Will you excuse me? I must find Charles. Alexander raised an eyebrow as she retreated. I'm sensing some social undercurrents. Boston's old guard doesn't quite know what to make of family members who stray from the approved path. I explained. Lucy. My mother's voice came from behind us. I turned to find her looking elegant but anxious in pale silver. You came. Mother. I greeted her with a kiss on the cheek. May I introduce Alexander Reed, CEO of Nexus Innovations, Alex, my mother. Eleanor Barnes. My mother shook his hand automatically, her social training overriding her obvious confusion. A pleasure, Mr. Reed. We're honored Nexus could join us tonight. The honor is mine. And may I say, your daughter is the most valuable addition to our executive team in years. Her accessibility framework is revolutionizing our product line. My mother blinked clearly, unused to hearing me described in such glowing professional terms. How wonderful. Lucy always had an eye for design, even as a child. It was the first time I could remember my mother acknowledging my creative interests in a social setting. Where's father? I asked, scanning the room. In his element, my mother replied, nodding toward the far end of the ballroom, where my father held court amid a cluster of attentive listeners. It's the annual speech and partnership announcement soon. He'll be expecting me. Excuse me, please. As she hurried away, Alexander turned to me. Your mother seems lovely. She is in her way, just constrained by decades of conforming to expectations. We continued circulating, speaking with various financial leaders interested in Nexus's growth. I was explaining our enterprise solutions to a banking executive when I felt a presence at my elbow. Sister dear, what a surprise. James's voice held its usual condescension, though I detected a hint of uncertainty beneath it. James? I turned to introduce Alexander, but my brother was already extending his hand. James Barnes, Senior Investment Strategist at Barnes Financial. I've heard impressive things about Nexus's growth curve. All true, Alexander replied with easy confidence. Your sister is a significant part of that success. James's smile didn't reach his eyes. Lucy always was. Persistent. Before I could respond, the room's lighting dimmed slightly, and a subtle chime indicated the speeches were about to begin. Guests moved toward the raised platform at the front of the ballroom, where my father stood commanding attention without effort. Walter Barnes at 62 remained an imposing figure, tall, distinguished with silver hair and piercing eyes that had intimidated countless adversaries across negotiating tables. Tonight, he wore a custom tuxedo with the Barnes family cufflinks that had belonged to his grandfather. Distinguished guests valued partners, friends. He began, his voice carrying effortlessly. Welcome to the 35th annual Barnes Financial Group Gala. The usual pleasantries followed, thanks to sponsors' acknowledgement of key clients' highlights of the year's successes. I listened with a strange detachment, no longer feeling the desperate need for approval that had defined my previous attendance at these events. Barnes Financial Group has thrived for 4 generations by recognizing when the winds of change are blowing. My father continued. Tonight, I'm pleased to announce the formation of our technology investment division, focused on identifying and supporting innovative firms in the digital space. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. This was a significant departure for a firm that had built its reputation on traditional investment strategies. To lead this initiative, I'm proud to announce our new partnership with one of the most dynamic companies in the technology sector. My father's gaze swept the room. Alexander Reed, CEO of Nexus Innovations, would you join me? Alexander squeezed my arm briefly before making his way to the platform. The two men shook hands for the benefit of photographers, the perfect image of traditional finance embracing the new economy. Thank you, Walter, Alexander said as he took the microphone. Nexus is excited to bring our expertise in digital innovation to this partnership. He spoke briefly about the opportunities ahead, the merging of financial stability with technological agility. My father stood beside him, nodding at appropriate moments, the picture of forward-thinking leadership. This collaboration wouldn't have been possible without the bridge between our organizations, Alexander continued, someone who understands both the values of established financial institutions and the innovative potential of technology. My stomach dropped. He wouldn't. I'd like to call up Lucy Barnes, our Director of Accessibility Innovation, whose insight has been invaluable to this partnership. The room fell silent. All eyes turned to me as the spotlight operator following Alexander's gesture illuminated where I stood. My father's expression froze a momentary crack in his perfect composure. Time seemed to slow as I made my way to the platform. This wasn't part of the program. My father's carefully orchestrated events never included surprises. Yet here I was, walking into the spotlight he had never willingly shared with me. Alexander stepped aside, offering me the microphone with an encouraging nod. I took it, my hand steady despite the adrenaline coursing through me. Thank you, Alex. I turned to face the crowd, catching sight of my mother's wide eyes, James's stunned expression, my father's carefully controlled neutrality. As someone with experience in both traditional finance and innovative technology, I'm excited about the potential of this partnership to create solutions that serve diverse users across the spectrum of abilities and needs. I spoke briefly about the importance of designing financial technology with accessibility in mind, the market opportunity it represented, the competitive advantage of inclusive design. My voice grew stronger with each word, my passion for the work evident. By combining Barnes Financial's stability with Nexus's innovation, we have an opportunity to set new standards for accessible financial services. Thank you. The applause that followed was genuine. Not the polite society applause of obligation, but the real response to a compelling vision. As I handed the microphone back to my father, our eyes met directly for the first time that evening. Thank you, Lucy. He said the words clearly unplanned. Something flickered in his expression. Surprise, reassessment, perhaps even a reluctant respect. The remainder of the formal program proceeded according to plan, but the dynamic had shifted. When guests approached me afterward, it wasn't with pity or curiosity about my family situation, but with questions about Nexus accessibility, design, and my professional insights. That was magnificent, Alexander told me quietly, as we accepted champagne from a passing server. Your father had no idea you'd be speaking, did he? None whatsoever. I might have mentioned to the event coordinator that we had a slight adjustment to the program, he admitted with a mischievous glint. Sometimes it's better to ask forgiveness than permission. As the evening progressed, I noticed my father watching me from across the room, not with the disapproving scrutiny of the past, but with something more complex. Confusion, perhaps, at this unfamiliar version of his daughter, who moved confidently through his world without seeking his approval. Near the end of the evening, as the crowd began to thin, a junior associate approached me. "Ms. Barnes, your father requests a moment in his office." The Barnes financial offices occupied the top 3 floors of the building adjacent to the hotel, connected by a private elevator. My father's corner office, with its commanding view of Boston Harbor, had been the site of countless family dressings down over the years. I found him standing at the window, his back to the door. "You wanted to see me, father?" Walter Barnes turned slowly. That was quite a performance. It wasn't a performance, it was my professional assessment of a business opportunity. He studied me as though seeing me for the first time. "Alexander Reed is quite the advocate for you. He values my work. Yes, I'm beginning to see that." He moved to his desk absently, straightening an already perfectly aligned pen. "Your mother misses you." "I miss her too. She's welcome to visit me any time." He nodded slightly. "James tells me you're living in Cambridge now." "Yes, smaller place, but it's mine." A heavy silence fell between us, decades of unspoken expectations and disappointments filling the space. "I won't apologize for pursuing the career I want," I said finally. "I'm not asking you to." His response surprised me, though I maintain that security should be prioritized over creative fulfillment. It was as close to a concession as Walter Barnes was capable of making. Not acceptance, certainly not approval, but a fractional softening of his absolute position. "Perhaps there's room for both," I suggested. He made a non-committal sound, then fixed me with a direct gaze. "You did well tonight. Your presentation was articulate." From my father, this qualified as effusive praise. I felt a familiar yearning for his approval, then gently set it aside. I no longer needed it to validate my choices. "Thank you. The partnership has genuine potential." Another silence less strained than the first. "Your birthday," he said abruptly. "The Disownment papers were, perhaps, an overreaction." I waited, allowing him to find his way to whatever he was trying to say. "I was concerned you were making an impulsive decision that would damage your prospects. I see now that you had considered your options more thoroughly than I realized." It wasn't an apology, but from Walter Barnes it was unprecedented. "I understand family legacy is important to you," I offered, "but I need to find my own path." He nodded once briskly. "Your mother is hosting Sunday dinner next week. She would appreciate your presence." Translation: "I'm not fully reconciled to your choices, but I'm willing to move forward if appearances can be maintained." "I'll be there," I promised, "though I should warn you I'll still be working at Nexus." The faintest hint of a smile touched his lips. "I would expect nothing less. Persistence is a Barnes family trait after all." As I left his office, I felt lighter than I had in years. Not because I'd won my father's approval, I hadn't, not entirely, but because I no longer needed it to feel complete. The following Sunday, I arrived at the Barnes family mansion for the first time since my birthday disaster. The familiar limestone facade and manicured grounds stirred mixed emotions. Nostalgia for simpler times when I believed parental approval equaled love, resentment for years of conditional acceptance, relief that I no longer lived under its roof. My mother opened the door herself instead of having the housekeeper do it, a small but significant break from protocol. "Lucy, darling," she embraced me with genuine warmth. "I'm so glad you came." The dining room looked the same. Intimidating mahogany table, ancestral portraits, crystal chandelier. But the dynamics around it had subtly shifted. My father still sat at the head, commanding attention, but he greeted me with a nod that lacked its former judgment. James seemed subdued, watching our interaction with curious eyes. "Lucy was telling me about her team at Nexus," my mother said as she served the soup, another departure from custom. "6 people reporting to her already. Isn't that impressive, Walter?" "Indeed," my father replied neutrally. "The technology sector does move quickly." Dinner proceeded with careful conversation, everyone navigating the new terrain of our relationship. No mention was made of disownment papers or ultimatums. Instead, we discussed market trends, Boston politics, an upcoming exhibit at the Museum of Fine Arts. The shift became apparent when my mother mentioned a charity gala she was organizing. "Lucy, I was thinking of updating the invitation design. Would you have time to look at what the committee has proposed? Your eye for design was always excellent." Before I could respond, my father interjected, Eleanor Lucy has professional responsibilities now. She can't be expected to volunteer for your committee work. My mother flushed. I only meant, I'd be happy to help Mom. I interrupted gently. Perhaps we could meet for lunch this week. The grateful look she gave me spoke volumes. For perhaps the first time I saw my mother clearly. A woman who had sublimated her own identity so completely into her role as Mrs. Walter Barnes that she barely knew how to exist outside it. As coffee was served, James unexpectedly turned the conversation in a new direction. I've been considering a career change, he announced, causing my father to set down his cup with a sharp clink. What sort of change? Walter's voice was carefully controlled. James glanced at me before answering. I've been approached about heading the financial strategy department at a healthcare technology company. The work they're doing in predictive healthcare analytics is fascinating. The silence that followed was deafening. James, the perfect Barnes son, the heir apparent, considering leaving the family business. It was unprecedented. I see, our father said finally. And this is something you're seriously contemplating. It is, James replied, a hint of defiance in his tone. I've arranged to tour their offices next week. My father's gaze shifted between James and me, clearly connecting dots. Lucy's example has inspired you, I take it? Partially, James admitted. Seeing her succeed outside the prescribed path made me question my own choices. My father sighed deeply, a man watching carefully laid plans unravel. I suppose the next generation must find its own way. He fixed James with a stern look. I expect a comprehensive analysis of this opportunity before you make any decisions. It wasn't enthusiastic support, but neither was it the categorical rejection I had received. Progress of a sort. After dinner, James pulled me aside in the library. I should have supported you, he said quietly, when Father presented those disownment papers. Why didn't you? He shrugged uncomfortably. It was easier to be the favorite child, to not rock the boat. And now I've seen what courage looks like. He hesitated. The healthcare tech company, I'd like your advice about the transition, if you're willing. I smiled at my brother, seeing him perhaps for the first time as a person rather than a competitor. I'd be happy to help. 6 months later, Nexus launched our first public product featuring my accessibility framework. The press coverage was overwhelmingly positive, highlighting how the inclusive design opened technology to users previously excluded. My team and I celebrated with champagne in the office, Alexander raising a toast to innovations that expand human potential. That evening, I received a text from my father, a link to a Wall Street Journal article featuring our launch with the simple message, "Well done." Not effusive praise, not wholehearted acceptance, but acknowledgement. From Walter Barnes, it was significant. The Barnes family had established a new equilibrium. Monthly family dinners continued with James, now working at the healthcare technology firm. My mother finding her voice more frequently. My father gradually accepting that his children had charted unexpected courses. Aunt Catherine joined us occasionally, her formerly marginalized status upgraded, now that rebellion had become somewhat acceptable. On my 27th birthday, we gathered again at the Hawthorne restaurant, the scene of last year's Disownment disaster. As dessert was served, my father presented me with an envelope. For a moment, my heart stuttered with memory. But this envelope contained a different sort of document, a certificate of shares in Nexus Innovations. A proper investment in your future, my father explained, on your terms. It wasn't a complete transformation. Walter Barnes would always value tradition, security, and family legacy. But he had created space for a different version of those values, one that included a daughter who defined success by her own standards. As for me, I had discovered something valuable through the painful journey from rejection to self-determination. True worth isn't measured by others' approval, but by the courage to live authentically, even when that means standing alone. The disownment papers that once represented my greatest failure had actually been the key to my freedom. And when that CEO called my name on that pivotal night, he wasn't just acknowledging my professional contribution. He was affirming the person I had always been, beneath the weight of expectations. Have you ever had to choose between pleasing others and being true to yourself? Drop your story in the comments below. And if this journey of finding strength through rejection resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to join our community of authentic souls. Remember, sometimes the door that closes behind you isn't ending your path. It's just forcing you to find the one that was meant for you all along. Thank you for listening, and may you always find the courage to be unapologetically yourself.